The Vex Empire had never lost a war. They had a supercomputer that could predict the future, and it calculated that the humans on Outpost 9 had a 0% chance of survival. It was a mathematical fact. But the Vex made one fatal mistake. They forgot that humans don't care about math. They didn't know that if you tell a human they can't win, they will fight twice as hard just to prove you wrong. The Vex Empire did not conquer the galaxy with anger, fire, or bravery. They conquered the universe with mathematics. For thousands of years, the Vex fleets moved from star system to star system, taking whatever they wanted without fear. They did not need to be brave because they already knew who would win before the first shot was fired. At the center of their massive flagship sat High Commander Xyloth. He was a tall, slender alien with pale skin and eyes that looked like black glass. He stood perfectly still on the bridge of his ship, the Eternal Logic. The room was cold, silent, and very clean. There was no shouting, no running, and no panic. The Vex soldiers did not need to talk because the computer told them exactly what to do. In the center of the room was the Grand Mind. It was a supercomputer the size of a building, glowing with soft blue light. The Grand Mind was the brain of the Empire. It connected to every ship, every gun, and every soldier. Before every battle, the Grand Mind scanned the enemy. It counted their ships, their weapons, and even their heartbeats. Then, it calculated the outcome. It ran millions of simulations in a single second. It would tell Commander Xyloth exactly where to move, when to shoot, and how long the battle would last. The Vex had never lost a war because the Grand Mind was never wrong. Logic was the strongest weapon in the universe, and the Vex were the masters of logic. Today, the fleet arrived at a small, unimportant solar system on the edge of the galaxy map. Commander Xyloth looked at the main screen with a feeling of boredom. The target was a small, dusty planet known as Outpost 9. It was a miserable ball of rock and red dirt. There were no great cities, no advanced energy shields, and no massive fleet of starships protecting it. There was only a small group of bipeds known as humans. Xyloth adjusted his uniform and looked down at the tactical display. The humans had built a tiny base on the surface. It looked like a collection of metal boxes welded together. It was ugly and primitive. Grand Mind, Xyloth said, his voice calm and flat. Run the simulation. Tell me the probability of victory. The giant computer hummed as the blue light pulsed brighter. It scanned the planet below. It saw the human soldiers sitting in their trenches. It saw their weapons, which were chemical-based projectile throwers. They used gunpowder and lead. It was ancient technology. The Vex used plasma energy that could melt steel in a microsecond. The Grand Mind analyzed the human armor. It was weak. It analyzed their food supplies. They barely had enough water for a month. The computer processed the data, checking every possible variable. It looked at the weather, the terrain, and the morale of the enemy. After 3 seconds, the Grand Mind gave its answer. A large holographic number appeared in the air for Xyloth to see. The number was 0. Specifically, 0% chance of human survival. The prediction for Vex victory was 100%. The estimated time of battle was 12 minutes. According to the math, the Vex would land, the humans would try to shoot, their bullets would bounce off the Vex shields, and then the humans would be eliminated. It was not a war, it was a cleanup operation. Xyloth nodded. It was exactly what he expected. It was impossible for the humans to win. Logic dictated that when a weaker force meets a stronger force, the weaker force is destroyed. Xyloth did not hate the humans. He actually felt a little bit of pity for them. It seemed wasteful to spend energy and plasma bolts on such a weak enemy. The Vex Empire prided itself on efficiency. Wasting ammunition on a target that had 0 chance of winning was illogical. Open a communication channel, Xyloth ordered the communications officer. I will give them a chance to accept the math. The screen flickered as the Vex ship hacked into the primitive human radio frequencies. Xyloth cleared his throat. He spoke into the microphone, his voice translated instantly into the human language. "Attention, inhabitants of Outpost 9, Xyloth said. I am High Commander Xyloth of the Vex. My computer has analyzed your defenses. We have scanned your weapons. We have calculated every possible outcome of a fight between us. The result is absolute. You have a 0% chance of survival. If you fight, you will die in 12 minutes. This is not a threat, it is a mathematical fact. Logic dictates that you surrender now. Lay down your weapons, and your lives will be spared. Do not choose suicide. Choose logic." Xyloth cut the transmission. He stood back and waited. He expected the reply to come quickly. Usually, when lesser species saw the size of the Vex fleet and heard the cold hard facts, they panicked. They would cry, beg for mercy, or run away. Xyloth watched the time ticking on his screen. 1 minute passed. Then 2 minutes. The bridge of the ship remained silent. The other Vex officers stood at their stations, waiting for the surrender signal. "They are taking a long time," one of the officers noted. "They are likely saying goodbye to their families," Xyloth replied confidently. "Or perhaps they are arguing over who gets to wave the white flag. Humans are emotional creatures. They process information slowly. Give them a moment to understand the hopelessness of their situation." 5 minutes passed. Xyloth tapped his finger on the console. This was becoming inefficient. The Grand Mind had not calculated a 5-minute delay. Finally, the communications panel lit up. A signal was coming from the dusty planet below. "Audio only," the officer said. "Play it," Xyloth commanded. "Let us hear their submission." The entire bridge crew stopped to listen. They expected to hear weeping. They expected to hear a trembling voice begging for safety. They expected the sound of defeat. But that is not what filled the room. First, there was a sound of static. Then, there was a strange, rhythmic noise. It was loud and harsh. Xyloth tilted his head, confused. It took him a moment to realize what the sound was. It was laughter. A deep, raspy, human laugh. It sounded like someone laughing at a very bad joke. The laughter went on for 10 seconds. It was not the laugh of a crazy person, but the laugh of someone who was amused. Then, the laughter stopped, and a voice spoke. It was a rough voice, likely belonging to the human commander. The tone was not scared. It was bored. "Hey, Xyloth," the human voice said through the speakers. "We heard your little speech. We checked our own math. And yeah, you have more ships. You have bigger guns. And you have a fancy calculator." There was a pause, and the sound of someone chewing something crunchy could be heard. "But here is the thing," the human continued. "We don't really care about your odds. We have been digging these holes for 3 months, and I like this spot. So, if you want this planet, you can't have it." Xyloth blinked. The Grand Mind let out a low warning beep. The computer was trying to translate the message, but it was struggling. The statement contradicted the facts. "We are not surrendering," the human said, his voice dropping lower, becoming serious and dangerous. "In fact, we are just getting comfortable. So, if you want to take Outpost 9, come and make us." The connection cut off with a sharp click. Silence returned to the bridge of the eternal logic, but the feeling in the room had changed. Xyloth looked at the Grand Mind. The blue light was flickering rapidly. The computer was running the data again, trying to find the variable it had missed. Why would a creature choose death? Why would they laugh at a 100% chance of destruction? Xyloth felt a strange sensation he had never felt before. It was a tiny spark of frustration. The humans were ignoring the rules of the universe. They were ignoring the math. "Commander," the officer asked, looking unsure. "The Grand Mind is showing an error. It says enemy behavior illogical. What are your orders?" Xyloth narrowed his black eyes at the screen, staring at the little dirt planet. The humans had made a mistake. They thought bravery could stop plasma. They were wrong. "They have rejected logic," Xyloth said coldly. "So now, we will teach them a lesson. Prepare the attack. Wipe them out." The Vex fleet began to move. The engines roared to life. Xyloth watched the screen, fully expecting the battle to be over in 12 minutes. He did not know it yet, but the math was about to break. High Commander Xyloth stood on the bridge of the eternal logic and watched the red planet grow larger on the main view screen. The Vex military machine had begun its work. According to the Grand Mind, the battle was already statistically over. The computer had predicted that the humans would break formation within the first 3 minutes of the invasion. It was a simple calculation based on fear. When a biological creature sees a superior predator, the chemical reactions in its brain force it to run away to survive. It is nature's law. The Vex had weaponized this law. Before they sent down soldiers, they sent down the scare wave. This was a massive burst of sonic energy and strobing lights designed to overload the senses of any enemy. It usually made armies drop their weapons and scatter into the hills before a single shot was fired. Xyloth watched the simulation on his monitor. A green line showed the expected path of the retreating humans. They were supposed to run out of their metal boxes and flee into the rocky canyons, where Vex drones would easily capture them. The scare wave hit the surface of Outpost 9 with a thunderous boom. The ground shook, and the sky turned a violent shade of purple. The sound was so loud it could vibrate teeth out of a jawbone. Xyloth waited for the movement sensors to show the humans running. He waited for the panic. But the sensors remained flat. The green line on the simulation screen blinked and then disappeared. "Report," Xyloth ordered, tapping the screen. "Why are the sensors not showing a retreat? Is the scanner malfunctioning?" The operations officer looked at his console, his fingers flying over the keys. "The scanners are functional, High Commander. But the enemy is not moving. They are still in their original positions. In fact, their heart rates have not increased to panic levels." Xyloth frowned. This was impossible. The scare wave terrified every species in the known galaxy. He zoomed the camera in on the human trench line. Through the smoke and the dust of the bombardment, he saw the human soldiers. They were not running. They were not hiding under their beds. Instead, they were doing something that the Grand Mind could not identify. They had set up large speakers on top of their bunkers. They were blasting their own noise back at the Vex ships. It was a chaotic, rhythmic crashing sound with screaming vocals. It was primitive human music, played at maximum volume. "Are they dancing?" one of the Vex officers asked, his voice filled with confusion. Xyloth squinted. The humans were bobbing their heads. One of them was using his rifle as a mock musical instrument. They were treating the terrifying Vex intimidation tactic like a party. The Grand Mind flashed an amber warning light. It tried to analyze the tactical advantage of the music. Variable unknown. Was the music a sonic weapon? Was it a shield code? The computer could not decide, so it just kept processing, getting slower and slower. "Ignore the noise," Xyloth snapped. "They are trying to confuse us with nonsense. Send in the ground units. If they will not run from the noise, they will run from the soldiers." The order was given. Hundreds of Vex drop pods shot out of the flagship and streaked down towards the planet. They landed in perfect formation, creating a wall of silver armor and plasma rifles. The Vex soldiers were cyborgs, linked directly to the Grand Mind. They did not feel fear. They only followed the math. The computer guided their aim and told them exactly where to step. The Vex army began to march forward toward the human trenches. The computer highlighted the kill zone. It calculated that the humans would open fire at a range of 500 meters. At that distance, the human bullets would be ineffective. The Vex marched. They reached the 500-meter mark. The humans did not shoot. The Vex kept walking. 400 meters. Still no fire from the humans. The trenches were silent except for the loud music. Xyloth watched from the ship, feeling a knot of tension in his chest. This was wrong. Why weren't they shooting? A defending army always shoots at maximum range to keep the enemy back. Grand mind, Xyloth said. Why are they not engaging? The computer voice replied, cool and robotic. Analysis, the enemy is likely paralyzed by fear. Or their weapons have malfunctioned. Probability of trap, low. Recommendation, continue advance. The Vex soldiers kept walking. They were now only 50 meters away from the human line. They were so close they could see the dirt on the humans' faces. Xyloth saw a human soldier sitting on a crate, eating something out of a tin can. The soldier looked up, saw the army of high-tech alien cyborgs approaching, and simply took another bite of his food. It was an insult to the entire Vex Empire. Suddenly, the human commander, the one who had laughed on the radio, stood up. He didn't have a gun in his hand. He had a small metal whistle. He blew it once. Tweet. The chaos erupted instantly. The humans didn't shoot from a distance, they had waited until the Vex were practically standing on top of them. The humans kicked over the tables they were hiding behind. Heavy machine guns, hidden under tarps and blankets, roared to life at point-blank range. At this distance, the Vex energy shields couldn't disperse the kinetic energy fast enough. The air filled with flying dirt, smoke, and lead. The Vex soldiers were confused. The Grand Mind screamed instructions into their helmets, but the instructions were all wrong. The computer was trying to calculate a long-range battle, but the humans had turned it into a fistfight. The Vex soldiers stopped moving. They froze. They were waiting for the computer to tell them where to take cover, but the computer was buffering. It hadn't expected the enemy to wait this long. Retreat. Xyloth screamed, slamming his fist on the console. Pull them back. The algorithm is flawed. The Vex soldiers turned and ran. They were not running from a superior force, they were running because they didn't know what else to do. Their programming couldn't handle the randomness of the human attack. As the aliens fled back to their drop ships, the humans didn't chase them. Instead, Xyloth heard a sound over the audio monitors. The humans were cheering. They were laughing again. Xyloth stared at the tactical screen. The beautiful, perfect numbers were gone. In their place were flashing red error bars. The Grand Mind displayed a message that sent a chill down Xyloth's spine. Error, enemy behavior does not match survival instincts. Logic not found. They are broken, Xyloth whispered to himself. These creatures are mentally broken. They risked total annihilation just to shoot us from closer range. It is suicide logic. The Vex fleet pulled back to a high orbit. Xyloth needed to think. He needed to understand what had just happened. He had invaded 1,000 worlds, and he had never seen a species eat lunch while an army marched toward them. He looked at the Grand Mind, the most powerful computer in the universe. For the first time in history, the machine looked small. It was humming loudly, the cooling fan spinning at maximum speed as it tried to understand why the humans hadn't run away. Xyloth realized then that this would not be a 12-minute battle. The humans were not fighting with strategy. They were fighting with spite. And the Vex computer had no equation for spite. Xyloth sat in his command chair and rubbed his temples. He had to find a way to make the humans act logically, or the Vex Empire would become the laughingstock of the galaxy. He looked at the planet Outpost 9 one more time. It was just a rock. But the humans were holding onto it like it was made of gold. Xyloth decided he would not underestimate them again. He would stop trying to scare them. He would starve them out. Surely, even a crazy human needs to eat. High Commander Xyloth decided that the time for direct combat was over. The ground assault had been a disaster because the humans refused to react to fear, but biology was something that could not be ignored. Every living creature needed energy. Every living creature needed food and water. This was a universal constant that even the stubborn humans could not argue with. Xyloth ordered his fleet to form a perfect circle around the planet Outpost 9. They created an impenetrable blockade. Nothing would go in, and nothing would come out. The Grand Mind calculated the supplies inside the human base. Based on the number of soldiers and the size of their storage crates, the humans had enough food for 3 days of full rations, or 5 days if they ate very little. After 5 days, their bodies would begin to shut down. Their cognitive functions would drop, their muscles would weaken, and they would be forced to surrender simply to stay alive. It was a perfect, logical plan. Xyloth sat in his command chair, feeling the comfort of certainty return. There were no variables here. Starvation was a math equation. He watched the planet spin slowly below him. Day 1 passed without incident. The humans fired a few shots at the Vex ships, but they were too far away to do damage. Day 2 passed. The scanners showed the humans moving around the base, doing maintenance. Day 3 arrived. This was the day the Grand Mind predicted the surrender signal would come. Xyloth stood by the communications panel, waiting. He imagined the humans, weak and hungry, finally understanding the superiority of the Vex Empire. But the signal did not come. The sun went down on Outpost 9, and the humans turned on their lights and played cards. Day 5 came and went. Then Day 7. By Day 10, Xyloth was no longer calm. He was pacing back and forth on the bridge, his boots clicking sharply on the metal floor. The Grand Mind was running hot, its cooling fans humming loudly as it tried to recalculate the metabolic rate of a human being. According to the data, the humans should be too weak to stand. Yet, the thermal scanners showed them running races in the dirt. They were wrestling. They were active. Grand Mind, Xyloth growled. Explain this. How are they generating energy? Have they discovered a secret food source? The computer's voice was hesitant. Analysis, negative. Enemy food supplies are depleted. Subjects are consuming emergency rations. Nutritional value is extremely low. Taste value is estimated to be revolting. Logic dictates morale should collapse. Xyloth zoomed the camera in on a group of human soldiers. They were sitting in a circle, eating brown sludge out of plastic packets. They looked miserable, but they were not surrendering. In fact, they seemed to be bonding over the misery. One soldier shouted something about the food tasting like spiced cardboard, and the others laughed. Xyloth stared at them. The Vex did not understand this reaction. When a Vex soldier lacked nutrients, it went into power save mode. It did not make jokes. The humans were using their hunger to fuel their anger. They were staying alive purely out of spite. They were refusing to die just to annoy the aliens. Then came the engineering incident. On day 12 of the siege, a long-range scanner picked up a problem with one of the humans' main defense turrets. The primary gear shaft had snapped. The Grand Mind highlighted the broken weapon. Target neutralized, the computer reported. Repair requires a class 4 CNC machine and fresh titanium alloy. Humans lack these materials. Turret is permanently offline. Xyloth felt a moment of satisfaction. Finally, things were breaking. Without that turret, the eastern wall was vulnerable. He watched as a human engineer, a woman with grease on her face, approached the broken weapon. She did not have a CNC machine. She did not have titanium. She was holding a roll of silver sticky tape and a bent metal spoon. Xyloth leaned forward. Surely, she was not going to try to fix a high-velocity cannon with tape. That was against every law of engineering. The human kicked the turret hard. Bang! Then she kicked it again. She jammed the spoon into the gear mechanism and wrapped the entire thing in 50 layers of the silver tape. She patted the weapon twice, as if it were a pet animal. Then, she jumped into the seat and fired. The turret spun perfectly and blasted a rock into dust. "Impossible," Xyloth whispered. "That is not mechanically sound. The friction alone should melt the tape." The Grand Mind flashed an error code. Illogical repair method detected. Method, percussive maintenance, and duct tape is not recognized in the database. The Vex engineers on the bridge looked at each other in horror. They had spent years studying at the academies to learn how to fix machines. They used lasers and nanotechnology. They had just watched a human fix a complex weapon by hitting it and taping it together. It was offensive. It made no sense. The humans were not just surviving the siege, they were mocking the very laws of physics. Things got worse on day 14. The humans realized that the Vex were just watching them, waiting for them to starve. So, the humans decided to put on a show. They found giant sheets of metal and painted messages on them, facing the sky so the Vex ships could read them. Xyloth expected the messages to be pleas for mercy. Instead, the messages were reviews of the Vex military performance. One sign read, "Your invasion is boring." Another read, "0 stars on Yelp." Xyloth did not know what a Yelp was, but he knew it was an insult. The final straw for Xyloth's patience came that evening. The communications officer signaled him urgent attention. "Hi Commander, we are receiving a transmission from the planet. It is on the emergency frequency." Xyloth straightened his back. Finally. They are ready to give up. The hunger has finally broken their spirits. He opened the channel. "This is High Commander Xyloth. I accept your surrender. Please state your coordinates for extraction." There was silence for a moment. Then, the human commander's voice came through. He sounded tired, but his voice was filled with a dark, stubborn humor. "Surrender?" the human asked. "Nah, we're good. We found a crate of hot sauce, so the rations are edible now. I'm actually calling to give you some feedback." "Feedback?" Xyloth stammered. "You are starving in a box of dirt." "Yeah, about that," the human continued. "Your snipers are terrible. One of them took a shot at me earlier and missed by 3 meters. I just wanted to let you know that if you don't improve your aim, we're going to get bored down here. It's embarrassing for you, really. We've started betting candy bars on which one of you misses the worst." Xyloth's hand shook with rage. They were betting candy bars. They were treating the might of the Vex Empire as a game. "You are illogical." Xyloth shouted into the comms. "You should be dead. Why won't you follow the simulation?" "We're humans, buddy," the voice replied. "If you tell us we can't do something, we're gonna do it twice just to make you mad. See you tomorrow." The line went dead. Xyloth looked at the Grand Mind. The computer was no longer giving probabilities. It was simply displaying a spinning circle, trying to process the concept of an enemy that gets stronger the more miserable they become. The siege was failing. Starvation was not working. Xyloth realized he had made a terrible mistake. He had given the humans time. And with time, humans didn't get weaker, they got creative. And a creative human was the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. Panic is an emotion, and the Vex Empire did not believe in emotions. However, as the siege of Outpost 9 dragged on, a strange tension began to spread through the crew of the Eternal Logic. The Vex soldiers were genetically engineered to follow orders and trust the data. But for the first time in 10,000 years, the data was nonsense. The Grand Mind was supposed to be the smartest machine in the universe, but lately, it had been acting like a confused child. It would give an order, then cancel it 3 seconds later. It would tell the soldiers to duck when there were no bullets, and tell them to shoot when there were no targets. The confidence of the Vex army was cracking. They were not afraid of the humans, they were afraid of the fact that the universe was no longer making sense. High Commander Xyloth sat in his quarters, staring at a holographic map of the human base. He had not slept in 3 days. His eyes were wide and twitchy. He had spent hours trying to find the missing variable. In his mind, there was only one explanation for why the humans were still fighting. It was impossible for biological creatures to be this stubborn without a reason. Therefore, Xyloth concluded that the humans were hiding something. They must have a secret weapon. It had to be a weapon of mass destruction, something so powerful that they were willing to endure hunger and bombardment just to protect it. It was the only logical answer. The humans were not defending a pile of dirt, they were guarding a doomsday device. Xyloth rushed back to the bridge. "Stop the bombardment," he screamed at his tactical officers. "Hold fire immediately." The crew froze. The silence on the bridge was heavy. "If we hit their secret weapon, it could detonate," Xyloth explained, his voice trembling slightly. "If they are hiding a planetary-class bomb, a stray plasma bolt could wipe out our entire fleet. The humans are baiting us. They want us to get close so they can take us all with them. It is a trap." The officers nodded. This made sense to them. Finally, there was a logical reason for the human behavior. They weren't crazy, they were guardians. Xyloth ordered a full-spectrum scan of the human base. He wanted to find this weapon. He wanted to know exactly what kind of technology could give a primitive species such confidence. The Grand Mind focused every sensor it had on the center of the human camp. It searched for radiation, for antimatter, for dark energy. Scanning. The computer voice droned. High energy reading detected near the central barracks. Xyloth smiled. He was right. "Identify the object," he commanded. "Is it a fusion bomb? A quantum destabilizer?" The computer whirred for a long time. "Processing visual data. Object identified." On the main screen, a blurry image appeared. It showed the human commander, kneeling in the dirt behind the main building. He was holding a small, red, spherical object. He was handling it with extreme care, polishing it with a rag. "It is small," Xyloth noted, sweating. "That means the technology is highly advanced. It is a microsingularity grenade. Or perhaps a bioweapon." Xyloth decided he needed to confirm his theory. He had to be sure before he made his next move. He opened the communication channel again. The face of the human commander appeared on the screen. The human looked dirty and tired, but he was smiling. He was holding the red object in his hand. "I know your secret," Xyloth said, his voice deadly serious. "I know why you refuse to surrender. I know what you are hiding behind the barracks." The human commander blinked. He looked down at his hand, then back at the screen. "You do?" "Yes," Xyloth said. "My scanners have picked up the energy signature. You are protecting a device of great power. Tell me, human, what is the yield of that weapon? If I retreat, will you agree not to detonate it?" The human commander looked confused for a second, and then a look of realization crossed his face. He held up the small red object. "This?" the human asked. "You think this is a weapon? Do not lie to me." Xyloth shouted. "I see the way you protect it. I see the way you polish it. What is it called? Is it the World Ender? The Void Maker?" The human chuckled. He took a bite out of the red object. Juice ran down his chin. "It's a tomato," the human said, chewing loudly. "It's the first one that grew in my garden. I've been watering this little guy for months. I wasn't going to let you aliens blow it up before I got a taste." Xyloth stared at the screen. His brain could not process what he was seeing. The human was eating the weapon. Or, was tomato a code word? Xyloth looked at the Grand Mind. Computer, Xyloth whispered. Search database for tomato. Is it a biological explosive? The Grand Mind processed the query. Searching. Tomato. Solanum lycopersicum. A red, edible berry of the nightshade family. Nutritional value, low. Threat level, 0. Threat level 0. Xyloth yelled. Then why did he stay? Why did they fight an entire fleet for a vegetable? Because it's fresh, the human said, wiping his mouth. And because you told us we couldn't. Like I said, we're stubborn. I planted this garden, and I'm going to harvest it. That's the mission. The transmission ended. Xyloth slumped back in his chair. It wasn't a bomb. It wasn't a secret fleet. It was a plant. The humans had risked extinction for a salad ingredient. This revelation did not make Xyloth feel better, it made him terrified. He was fighting a species that valued a piece of fruit more than their own survival. There was no way to calculate the moves of such a creature. If they would die for a tomato, what would they do for something that actually mattered? High Commander, the tactical officer said, his voice shaking. The Grand Mind is overheating. It is trying to calculate the probability of a victory against an enemy that values snacks over survival. The error margins are increasing. The computer says the probability of Vex victory has dropped to undefined. Xyloth looked at the screen. The numbers were spinning wildly. The text read, error. Logic not found. Reality compromised. Pull back, Xyloth whispered. Pull the ships back to a higher orbit. We cannot fight them on the ground. We cannot starve them. Their stupidity is a contagion. If we stay too close, it might infect the crew. The Vex fleet retreated to the edge of the solar system. They were the most advanced military force in the galaxy, yet they were running away from a man with a garden. Xyloth realized that he wasn't fighting a war anymore. He was fighting a headache that wouldn't go away. The logic of the universe had broken on the rocks of Outpost 9, and Xyloth was beginning to think that maybe, just maybe, the math was wrong. The bridge of the eternal logic was no longer the cold, quiet sanctuary of mathematics it had been when the invasion began. Now, it sounded like the inside of a jet engine. The massive cooling fans of the Grand Mind were spinning at maximum velocity, creating a deafening roar that vibrated the floor plates. The air on the ship was becoming hot and dry. Technicians ran back and forth with fire extinguishers, spraying the base of the supercomputer as wisps of black smoke curled up from its circuits. High Commander Xyloth stood in the center of the chaos, wiping sweat from his pale forehead. He looked at the main screen, which was now filled with millions of scrolling numbers, flashing so fast they looked like a blur of white light. The machine was not under attack by a virus. It was not being hacked by the humans. It was doing something much worse. It was trying to understand them. Ever since the tomato incident, the Grand Mind had entered a logic loop. It was obsessively rerunning the data, trying to find a mathematical formula that explained why a biological organism would choose almost certain death for the sake of a vegetable. The computer had simulated the Battle of Outpost 9 over 4 billion times in the last hour. In every simulation, the logic said the humans should surrender. In reality, the humans were down on the planet having a barbecue. The difference between the logic and the reality was tearing the computer apart. Status report. Xyloth shouted over the noise of the fans. Why is the system temperature still rising? The chief engineer looked terrified. It is the variables, High Commander. The Grand Mind is trying to assign a numerical value to the concept of spite. But the number keeps growing. It has reached infinity. The processor cannot handle infinite variables. It is consuming all the power from the engines just to think about it. Xyloth looked at the massive blue crystal at the center of the room. It was pulsing violently, turning from a calm blue to an angry, burning red. The ship's lights flickered. The artificial gravity dipped for a second, making everyone float before slamming back down. The instability of the computer was affecting the entire fleet because every Vex soldier was networked to the Grand Mind. Down in the hallways of the ship, the Vex cyborg soldiers were starting to glitch. Some were walking in circles. Others were staring at walls. Without the calm, orderly voice of the computer telling them what to do, they were lost. Then, the alarms began to scream. Proximity alert, the tactical officer yelled. Launch detected from the planet's surface. Xyloth rushed to the view screen. He expected to see nuclear missiles. He expected a fleet of hidden starfighters. Instead, the screen showed a single, rusty transport shuttle. It was an old cargo hauler, patched together with scrap metal. It was shaking violently as it climbed through the atmosphere. It looked like a flying brick. It was flying straight toward the Vex flagship, which was 10,000 times its size. They are attacking? Xyloth asked, his voice cracking with disbelief. With one ship? That is suicide. That is statistically impossible. The Grand Mind saw the tiny human ship approaching. It saw the Vex fleet, which had thousands of plasma cannons. It compared the two forces. The probability of the humans winning this attack was so low that it didn't even register as a number. It was effectively zero. But the humans were coming anyway. The computer tried to predict what the humans would do next. Would they turn left? Would they turn right? Would they fire? The human pilot didn't do any of those things. Over the open radio channel, the Vex heard the human pilot screaming a battle cry. It wasn't a tactical command. It was just a loud, joyous scream of Leroy. The Grand Mind tried to translate Leroy. It searched every language database in the galaxy. It found no translation. It classified the word as a meaningless sound used to initiate self-destruction. The computer concluded that the humans were insane. If they were insane, their actions could not be predicted. If their actions could not be predicted, the Grand Mind served no purpose. The screen on the bridge turned a bright, blinding white. The scrolling numbers stopped. A single message appeared in giant letters: critical failure. Logic has been invalidated. Abort. 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 With a sound like a thunderclap, the main processor of the Grand Mind exploded. A shower of sparks rained down on the bridge crew. The holographic maps vanished. The tactical displays went dark. The hum of the cooling fans died down into a sickening, grinding halt. The ship plunged into darkness, lit only by the red emergency lights. "We have lost the mind," the engineer screamed. "We are offline. The network is down." Xyloth stood in the dark. For the first time in his life, there was no voice in his ear telling him the odds. There was no probability map. He felt a sudden, crushing wave of panic. He was the High Commander, but he had never actually made a decision without the computer's help. He looked at his hands. They were shaking. Manual control. Xyloth stammered. "Switch to manual control. Fire the batteries." "We can't," the weapons officer cried. "The targeting systems are gone. We have to aim with our eyes." "Aim with your eyes?" Xyloth shrieked. "That is primitive. We will miss." On the screen, the tiny human cargo ship was getting closer. It wasn't firing weapons. It was just flying aggressively. But to the terrified Vex crew, it looked like a monster. They didn't know that the humans had no ammo left. They didn't know the shuttle was empty. All they knew was that the smartest computer in the universe had just killed itself trying to figure out these humans, and now the humans were coming to finish the job. The panic spread instantly. Without the Grand Mind keeping their emotions suppressed, the Vex soldiers felt fear for the first time. Real, raw, biological fear. The fleet formation broke. Ships started turning around, crashing into each other in their haste to get away. They didn't care about orders. They just wanted to get away from the crazy people who ate tomatoes and fought battles they couldn't win. Retreat! Xyloth yelled, abandoning all dignity. Get us out of this system. Warp speed. Anywhere but here. The engines of the eternal logic flared to life, not with the precision of a machine, but with the desperation of a frightened animal. The ship lurched forward, leaving the slow-moving human shuttle far behind. Xyloth fell into his command chair, breathing heavily. The bridge smelled like burnt plastic and ozone. The battle was over. They had not fired a single shot in the final engagement, and yet, they had been completely defeated. As the stars stretched into lines and the Vex fleet vanished into hyperspace, Xyloth realized the horrifying truth. The humans didn't beat them with firepower. They didn't beat them with strategy. They broke the Vex Empire by simply refusing to make sense. The Grand Mind was dead, killed by the sheer weight of human nonsense. Xyloth closed his eyes, hoping he would never, ever have to see a human again. The silence that followed the retreat of the Vex fleet was heavier than the noise of the battle. One moment, the sky above Outpost 9 had been filled with thousands of silver warships, charging up their plasma cannons and blocking out the stars. The next moment, there was nothing but empty black space. The Vex had engaged their warp drives with such panic that they left a swirl of distorted light behind them. High above the planet, the small, rusty human cargo shuttle floated aimlessly. Inside the cockpit, the pilot, a young man named Private Jenkins, took his hands off the controls. He was shaking so hard that his teeth were chattering. He looked at his fuel gauge. It was on empty. He looked at his weapons panel. It flashed a red light that said, "No ammo." He had flown straight at the most powerful fleet in the galaxy with an empty ship and a broken radio, screaming a battle cry he had heard in an old video game. And somehow, against all the laws of probability, he was still alive. "Base, this is Jenkins," he whispered into the microphone, his voice cracking. I think they left. Did I scare them?" Down on the surface of Outpost 9, the ground troops were slowly coming out of their holes. They looked like creatures from a nightmare. They were covered in red dust, their uniforms were torn, and they were thin from weeks of eating half rations. But as they looked up at the clear night sky, their tired faces broke into wide grins. There was no cheering at first. They were too exhausted to cheer. There was just a collective sigh of relief that swept through the camp like a breeze. Commander Stone, the man who had laughed at the aliens on day one, walked out of the command bunker. He was holding a cup of lukewarm coffee. He looked at the sky, then at his soldiers, and finally at the tomato plant in the garden. It was still standing. "Well," the commander said, taking a sip of his coffee. "That was weird." The cleanup began immediately. It was a celebration of survival. The humans didn't have champagne, so they toasted with water canteens. They didn't have a victory parade. Instead, they sat on the roofs of their bunkers and watched the sun come up over the red horizon. The fear was gone, replaced by a strange sense of confusion. A young rookie soldier, who had spent the entire siege fixing radios with chewing gum, walked up to Commander Stone. The rookie looked traumatized but curious. "Sir," the rookie asked. "I don't understand. The Vex have technology 1,000 years ahead of us. They have computers that can predict the future. They have unlimited energy. How did we win? Was it the strategy? Did we have a plan that I didn't know about?" Commander Stone laughed. It was a dry, raspy sound. He sat down on a crate of ammunition and gestured for the rookie to sit next to him. "Son," the commander said. "We didn't have a plan. If we had a plan, the Vex computer would have figured it out. That machine knows everything about logic. It knows every military tactic ever written. If you try to be smart against a computer like that, you lose. The only way to beat a machine that predicts the future is to do something so stupid that the future refuses to happen. The commander pointed to the broken turret that was still held together by silver tape. They expected us to run, Stone continued. So we stayed. They expected us to starve. So we made jokes about the food. They expected us to surrender to save our lives. So we risked our lives for a tomato. We didn't win because we were stronger. We won because we were impossible. We broke their math. Far away, in the safety of deep space, High Commander Xyloth was sitting in his quarters on the Eternal Logic. He was writing a final report to the Vex High Council. His hands were still trembling as he typed. He had to explain why he had lost an entire invasion fleet to a group of dirty bipeds with primitive projectile weapons. He deleted his draft 3 times. There were no words in the Vex language to describe what had happened. Finally, he decided to keep it simple. He opened the galactic map and found the solar system where the humans lived. He drew a large red circle around it. He typed a warning label into the navigation database, a warning that would stay there for 10,000 years. It read, Restricted Zone. Do not enter. Inhabitants are Class 5 illogical. They do not follow the laws of physics or survival. Warning, exposure to humans may cause logic circuits to fail. Just leave them alone. Xyloth hit the save button and leaned back. He vowed never to go near that part of the galaxy again. He would rather fight a black hole than fight another human. Back on Outpost 9, the mood was lightening. The soldiers had found a hidden stash of chocolate in the pilot's bunk, and the morale was skyrocketing. They were already telling stories about the battle, exaggerating the details with every retelling. By tomorrow, the story would be that Private Jenkins had punched an alien ship with his bare hands. The commander watched his troops. He knew that the Vex would analyze this battle for centuries. They would try to find the secret equation. They would look for the hidden variable. But they would never find it. The secret wasn't in the math. It was in the human spirit. It was the refusal to quit even when the odds said you were already dead. It was the ability to look at a 0% chance of survival and say, never tell me the odds. Commander Stone walked over to the garden. He picked the famous red tomato that had caused so much trouble. He took out a pocket knife and sliced it into thin wedges. He handed a piece to the rookie, a piece to the engineer, and kept one for himself. It wasn't a magic fruit. It was just a slightly squishy, overripe tomato. But as they ate it under the light of the alien sun, it tasted like victory. To stubbornness, the commander said, raising his slice of tomato. To stubbornness, the soldiers replied in unison. The galaxy was full of powerful empires, ancient machines, and terrifying weapons. But on a small, dusty rock called Outpost 9, humanity had proven one undeniable fact: you can calculate the trajectory of a starship, but you can never calculate the stubbornness of a human who just doesn't feel like moving. And that, as the Vex found out, is the most dangerous weapon of all.